Hi there, welcome. Today we're going to talk about jQuery and the DOM again, and this time we're going to talk about manipulating the DOM. Um, just as a reminder, the DOM is the document object model, which is how a browser views a website. It's a tree structure with parents, children, and siblings. Um, this video assumes that you know how to access the DOM. The next three slides will be a very brief review of that, and then we're going to get into modifying the DOM. So this is one of our first review slides, altering existing elements. We've got some basic methods: text, HTML, val, and CSS. Each of these methods can be used either to get information or to set information. And you can see over here, I'm getting the text and then setting the text, getting the HTML, then setting the HTML, getting the CSS color attribute, and then setting the CSS color attribute. Also as review, entering the DOM in jQuery, we can get in through document, which is the root element. We can get a list of all of the elements that have a certain tag name or nested tags. I can get all the elements that have a given class, or I can get an element by ID. And then finally, our last lecture was on navigating the DOM. As we navigate the DOM and we find our entry point, we can then navigate our way through the children or the siblings or the parent. We can use first and last, next and prev to go through the children and siblings lists, or if we use a find and we get a list of things, we can use first, last, next, and prev as well. So that's a little review of how to access and navigate the DOM. And again, today we're going to be talking about manipulating the DOM. We're going to be talking about we're looking at a page and we want to add content that wasn't there before. We're not talking about just making things appear. We're talking about creating brand new HTML that was not on the page before that we're adding, or HTML that was on the page that we're removing. Once again, not just hiding, but actually removing. So one of the first things we have to learn how to do is how to create a new element in jQuery. So we need to create that element along with any sub-elements that go inside of it and populate them with text or HTML. This can take place in the ready method or in an action method or anywhere inside jQuery that we want it to. So over here on the right, you'll see we're going to create a new div with hello as the text and a background color of yellow. So the first thing is I create a new node, and that's an HTML element here. So I'm going to create a div node. And so I do $ parenthesis quote, open div, close quote, close parenthesis. And I have to make sure that I store that in a variable. And I store it in a variable so that A, I can alter it, and B, I can add it into the document later on. Then I'm going to take that node that I just created and add the text hello, which is going to put hello between these two divs. And then I'm going to take that node and I'm going to give CSS and I'm going to set the color attribute to yellow. Alternative to doing this in 3 lines, I can do it in a single line with jQuery chaining, where I do div node equals the div dot text dot CSS. Once again, it's important to save this node in a variable so that it can be inserted later into the DOM. Now, when we modify the DOM, one of the ways that we can do it is by adding children of an element. To add children, we use append and prepend. So if I go in and I create a new node, which is an li node and has text windows, and I go to the only UL tag that we have and I append that node, appending adds a child element to the end of the list. So you'll see over here under UL, we get a new li with windows at the end. Becomes the last child. Alternatively, we can prepend. So again, I'm making a new li, and this time with text BlackBerry. And I'm going to go find my UL element, and I'm going to prepend that node, the BL node, and prepend makes it a first child. When we're adding children, our only options are to add first with prepend or add last with append. If we want to add something else in here, then we have to add it as a sibling of one of these li nodes, which is next. So now we talk about adding siblings. So siblings use the before and after uh, functions. So once again, I'm going to do the same thing that I did last time, but instead of adding them as children, I'm going to add them as siblings. Be careful. A lot of people get before and after confused with next and prev. Next and prev are for um, traveling through the DOM. Before and after are for adding things into the DOM. So before adds an element, a sibling element before the current element, and after adds a sibling element after the current element. So again, I'm going to make my win node with text windows, and I'm going to go to ul children dot last, which is pointing here, and I'm going to say dot after. So dot after, I'm going to add win node, so it finds the last li and it adds something after it. Alternatively, I can do the same thing, but I can use before. So if I find the first one and I go before it, then it adds it here. Now, had I done the same, if I'd have done children dot last dot before, then that BlackBerry node would have gone right in here between Android and iOS. So that's how we're adding siblings in this case, whereas before we were adding children. We have a little bit of a problem with dynamically created elements. When document.ready is called, if we have an event in there, a click or a mouse over or anything like that, those events are propagated to their elements when the page loads. If I write a click function or any kind of event function for something that hasn't been added yet, even if I apply it to all divs and then I add a div, that particular div that I added after the page has loaded, I added it dynamically, doesn't have that click event propagated to it. It doesn't have that click event attached to it. So I need a new way to do this. So anytime that I've got elements that are going to be on the page, I can use my standard click. Write your element here, dot click, and then call your function. However, if I've got something that's going to be dynamically generated, then I have to attach that to something that's always there. I typically use document or body because I'm not going to get rid of those things. And I have to use an on event. So I do document.on click my element, whatever it is, and then call my function. Once again, it's different if this is an ID that wasn't there before or an H1 that wasn't there before. But if I have a mixture of divs and I want them all to do the same thing, and some of them were there before and some of them are dynamically generated, then this is the code that I have to utilize, and it will affect all of them, whether they were there before or dynamically generated. This code over here on the left only works for elements that were present at the page load. Finally, the last thing we can do is delete information from the page. So remove takes an element out of the DOM. It does return that element for storage if you want to. In this case, we're going to remove the BlackBerry list item. So I get the list of LIs and I get the first thing in that list and I remove it. That gets rid of this thing. If I do empty, that's another way. It deletes all the children from an element. So if I go to head.empty, then anything in head disappears. If I went to body.empty, the whole content of the page disappears. All right, let's look at some example code. So this is the same web page that we were using in our previous document when we were talking about traversal and access. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to look at a couple of examples of how things go. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to first just create a node. So it's going to be var, and I'm going to call it an H1 node. And I'm going to set that equal to, as we said, $ quotes, and we create an H1 element. And then I'm going to put some text inside of that. And that text is going to be, this is a header. And so now I've created that node, and now I need to add that node into the document somewhere. So we're going to add it in a bunch of places. The first place that we're going to add it is we're going to add it as the first child of paragraph 1. So we're going to say, all right, here we go. Find the ID of paragraph 1. And we're going to prepend, and we're going to prepend H1 node. And so this is happening when the document is ready. And so the first thing that's going to happen is I'm going to get an H1 sitting right in here that says this is header. So here we go. There it is. The first thing inside of the paragraph even comes before the H2. If you look at that paragraph, Here's div ID paragraph 1. It became the first child. Really interesting to watch this happen in the inspector. If I go into paragraph 1, watch what happens. Watch right here when I refresh this page. This is going to disappear and then reappear again. All right, it happens a little fast. Let's put a click around it, and then you'll see what happens. So let's apply this to an H2 click event. And so this won't happen until we click. And then end that. All right, now let's take a look at that again, and we'll refresh, and you'll see that there's nothing here between the div and the H2. And as soon as I come click on either of these H2s, but I'm going to click on this one, watch over here on the right, and you'll see that H1 appear. Again, this isn't something that was hidden. This is something that we created and pushed in. And that's kind of where the power of the DOM comes in. And again, the inspector is going to be a huge tool for you as you're working through this to find where things are and where you want them to go. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is, so that was an append. I could prepend it if I just change this to, sorry, if I change this to append from prepend, now it'll become the last thing in the page or in the div. So there it is, being the last thing in that first div. Okay, so we've got that. Now I can do a before or after. So let's say we're working on an H2, and let's say that we're going to do this as whichever one got clicked on. So this got before, and we push in the H1 node. So whichever thing I click on, the H1 node is now going to come in before it. So if I click on that, it comes in before it. If I click on this, it comes in before it. All right. And again, similarly, if I do after, and I refresh. Now when I click on them, they come in after those H2s. All right. Now I'm going to do an H1 click function. And what we're going to do with that H1 click function is we're going to say alert this dot text, and we're just going to get the text out of the thing. Now we do have an H1 here. It's written at the top of the page. I'm sorry. We're going to yeah, we do have an H1 there. All right. So I do have an H1 here. It's written at the top of the page, and when I click it, I see it. And now I'm going to click here, and I get this new H1, but when I click on that, it doesn't work. When I click on this one, it does work. When I click on this one, it doesn't work, and that's because this one was added dynamically after the page has loaded. This click function that I'm writing will only work on H1s or H2s that were created or were present when the page loads. That event gets propagated to those elements. If it's created after, then I want to use the on function. And the on function says, what's the event? What's the thing that I wanted to attach to H1s? And then what's the function? The difference is over here, I have to attach it to something that's always there. I typically go with the document or the body tag. Now, with this change, writing my click function as an on event, when I refresh, it does work on the thing that was there previous, and it works on the dynamically loaded content as well. So if you've got anything that is going to be dynamically loaded, you want to make sure that you're using this on event. Last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an empty function. And so what I'm going to do is on click, after I alert that, I'm going to take paragraph 1, and I'm going to empty it. And then I'm also going to find, let's see, paragraph 2 dot find the H2s that are in it, which is this modifying the DOM thing. And I'm going to say remove that. So I'm going to get rid of all of this content. Let's do this again. I'm going to get rid of all of this content, and I'm going to get rid of this H2, all happening when I click on this H1. So here it is, and now all that stuff is gone. If I look at the inspector, you're going to see that inside the body, paragraph 1 is now empty. Paragraph 2 does not have an H2 inside of it. I didn't hide those things. I absolutely removed them from the document. They are no longer part of the tree. Okay, so then the last thing that we have here is we've got, of course, some practice to work on. And so what I'm asking you to do here is a very similar setup to what we had the other day. And that is add jQuery code to complete the tasks. So when I click on the green button, I'm going to add a span here. And when I click on the red button, I'm going to add a span there. So work on that. Again, click on this link for more information. And then you can go do more practice problems. This time do level 2 only on the web page. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.